review the proposed agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Good morning, yet Bennett, and I'd like to thank Delegate Charlene So for her prayer. Good morning. You have your proposed agenda for the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee 24th Navajo Nation Council regular meeting, June 22nd, 2022, 10 a.m. Presiding, the Honorable Daniel E. So as chairperson and the Honorable Carl R. Slater as vice chairperson. Place is the Via Telecommunications, Window Rock, Navajo Nation, Arizona. 1, call meeting to order, roll call, invocation, announcements. 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. 3, review and adopt the agenda. 4, review and adopt the journals. None. 5, reports. A is the Navajo Veterans Administration. And the issues are the options presented and or provided to the agency veterans organizations. Presenter is Mr. James Zerling, Executive Director for the Veterans Administration. B is the Office of Management and Budget, Office of the Controller, and the Department of Justice. The issues are reporting the veterans numbers and the Chapter 50/50 formula for veterans chapters and veterans organizations. Also the legal analysis of the legal formula used to distribute veterans funds to veterans organizations, and that'll be by DOJ. Presenters that were requested were Mr. Cordell Shorty with the Contracts and Grants Officer, with the Contract and Grants Office of Management and Budget, Dominic Bial, Executive Director, Office of Management and Budget. Elizabeth Begay, Controller, Office of the Controller. Robert Willie, General Accounting Manager, Office of the Controller. And also the Latanya Johnson, Assistant Attorney General with the Human Services and Government Unit with the Navajo DOJ. Also, Ms. Doreen McPaul, Attorney General for the Navajo Nation's Office of the Attorney General. 6 new business, 7 new old business, none. 8, close the meeting, announcements and adjournment, next meeting date. Mr. Chair. Also, Mr. Chair and members of the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee, I did get an email from Ms. Johnson indicating that Christopher Snyder, Principal Attorney for the Human Service and Government Unit with DOJ, will be representing DOJ. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, how do you wish to proceed? Motion by Honorable Paul Begay, second by Honorable Listen Juanita. We have folks came into the DNS conference room. Could you introduce yourself before we take it to a vote? You might step up here. We can hear you. Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you for coming into our meeting. We have a motion and a second. The addition, deletion, modification. If not, then
Mr. Chair.
Hello?
Mr. Chair. Requesting to address the committee. This is Rosalind Begay from Social Services.
Mr. Gay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My request to the committee is to schedule the continued work session with the Division of Social Services on legislation 0020-22. It was, the committee held a work session on June 14th, and the next date to continue that work session was going to be June 20th at 11 a.m. However, that fell on a Navajo Nation or a national holiday. Therefore, I sent an email to Legislative Advisor Ms. Benally, who in her reply indicated that the committee would be setting the date today at today's meeting on when that work session will be scheduled. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm requesting that the committee consider that on its agenda today. Thank you.
So yes, that'll be at item 8. We get to close of meeting, announcements, adjournment, and the next meeting. That's when the committee will discuss that. Just for your information, if we weren't going to meet today, we had gotten approval to meet on June 27th as in lieu of a regular meeting. Since this issue came up, this urgent matter with the Veterans Administration, that June 27th meeting will be converted to a work session to address the plan of operation for the Division of Social Services. Committee members, and I have sent out emails in advance so we could all put it on our calendar. Committee members, any other? Mr. Mose, roll call vote, please.
Yes, sir. Morning, everyone. Honorable Paul Begay Jr.
That'll get Paul Gable screen.
Honorable Paul Begay Jr. votes green. Honorable Pernell Halona. Honorable Pernell Halona. Honorable Carl Russell Slater.
Green.
Honorable Carl Russell Slater votes green. Honorable Charlene So.
I vote green.
Honorable Charlene So votes green. Honorable Edson J. Wanika. Honorable Edson J. Wanika votes green. Honorable Pernell Halona. Honorable Pernell Halona. Chair, vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you. Mr. Mose, vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed, the chair not voting. So we go to item 4, review and adopt the journals, there being none. We go to item 5, report. A, Navajo Veterans Administration. Mr. James Swearline, how are you on the call?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
You have the floor to present what you've asked of the agency veteran organization.
I'm sorry, Chair, I'm on a bad internet connection apparently, and my connection keeps going up and down. I thought I heard you say that I may proceed with the report, sir. Is that correct?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you, sir. Since I was not given a read ahead on what to expect for today's meeting, I'm only going based on what was on the agenda relevant to the options presented and or provided to the agency veterans organization, assuming that this is in reference to the FY23 budget. On May 24th, I had sent an email to each of the agency commanders, all 10, that stated each agency will get to choose what they think is best for their veterans. What I need from you is an email reply, a memo, or an agency resolution that indicates how your respective agency wishes to do their budgets. Do you wish to stay with the single agency budget? Do you want that total calculated based on veteran population or using the 50-50 formula, which does not apply to the Veterans Trust Fund? Do you want individual chapter allocations within the single agency budget, or do you want individual CVO business units? How do you want the funds allocated to the CVOs? Based on veteran population or also using the 50-50 formula? Once I have the response for all 5 agencies, I will run the numbers and provide you with a copy of those calculations. So with that, there were 2 main questions that were asked of the agencies. First, do you want to go with a single agency business unit and have all of your veterans who are submitting applications for financial assistance in fiscal year 23 draw from the same account? Option 2, do you want to have a single agency business unit but have individual CVO allocations under that business unit that veterans from those specific chapters would then draw down on? Or option number 3, individual CVO business units, where again, individual veterans from those chapters would draw down on the funds from those business units. Once that first question was answered, the second question would be, how do you want the funds for any of those individual allocations to be calculated? Calculated based on the number of veterans who are registered with the agency offices. This would be veterans, Gold Star mothers, and surviving spouses. Or do you want the numbers to be calculated based on the Navajo Nation's 50-50 formulation, which utilizes the registered voter population and does not have anything to do with the number of veterans assigned to each chapter? So those were the questions that were provided to the agencies. Western Agency has provided a resolution back that, as we are interpreting it, they are saying that they want to remain with the single agency business unit as it has been for the last 2 years for that agency. Eastern Agency has sent a memo, says that they wish to stick with the single agency business unit with CVO allocations, and those CVO allocations determined based on the 50-50 formula. At a Chinle Agency meeting, the Chinle Agency held on May 27th, they chose to stick with the single agency business unit, having CVO allocations based on the veteran population. And according to a phone call that I received from a commander within Fort Defiance Agency based on the meeting they had this past Friday, they also chose to go with a single agency business unit with individual CVO allocations, with their allocations calculated based on their veteran population. The only agency that I do not have a final response back from at this time is Northern Agency. It's my understanding that they've had at least one other meeting and a second or third meeting scheduled to determine how their recommendation is going to be for their agency's budget. So with that, I conclude my report and remarks and stand by for any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Schwerlein, could you forward those documents you referred to legislative staff?
Yes, sir.
Committee members, do we have any questions?
Chair,
Honorable Edison Winika. Then after that, we'll have Honorable Vice Chair Slater.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, and good morning. And all those that are listening in. My question has to do with, I know the veterans been pursuing, trying to get population of the veterans. Has that been confirmed? Do you have number of veterans per agency? Because I know there's always been a problem using 50-50, and a lot of the veterans didn't agree with that because it has to do with all the registered voters of the chapter. So that's my question. If you have a population of the veterans now. Thank you.
Honorable Vice Chair Slater. After your comments and questions, we'll go back to Mr. Swerline.
Thank you. Chair, I just wanted Mr. Zerline to restate what the preference was from Chinle Agency Veterans Organization.
Mr. Swerline?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start with Delegate Slater's question first to restate the preference of Chinle. Based on what they told me at their agency meeting that was held on May 27th, they said that they wanted to stick with the single agency business unit with individual CVO allocations for each of the 16 chapters under Chinle Agency, and to have those chapter allocations calculated using the veteran population. For Delegate Winika, yes, sir. I do have the numbers of how many veterans are registered, veterans, surviving spouses, and Gold Star mothers within each agency and within each chapter. I'll just give you the agency numbers right now. This is again, veterans, surviving spouses, and Gold Star mothers. For Fort Defiance, 2,074. Chinle Agency, 1,363. Eastern Agency, 1,809. Northern Agency, 1,362. And Western Agency, 1,678. That is a total of veterans, Gold Star mothers, and surviving spouses of 8,286. Thank you for the questions, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Swerline. Committee members, do we have any follow-up questions?
Chair.
Honorable Vice Chair Slater, Facility.
Thank you. So how is this going to look when different agencies want to do it based off veterans count versus 50-50? Because wouldn't the allocations that go to each agency then first determine what, the methodology would determine how much goes to each agency, and then it would be broken down from there. So if one agency wants to use the veterans count, is that going to be applied right off the top before the 50-50 formula for the other agencies, or vice versa? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, to me, it seems like there has to be consistency across the whole system in order to make it work. I just am curious mathematically how it's all going to break down. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Vice Chair Slater. Mr. Swerline.
Thank you for that question, Delegate Slater. The way that I made the allocations is we ran the numbers from the total that was given to us from the controller's office and divided that by the total number of veterans, Gold Star mothers, and surviving spouses that we have registered with the administration. That gave us an average of $582.44 per applicant. We then took that dollar amount and multiplied that by the number of registered applicants for each agency, and that gave us a subtotal. That is the most fair way of making the funds allocation to each agency equitable across the veteran population. And then it is with that total that the agencies get to choose if they want that subtotal further divided back down to the CVOs based on the veteran population or the 50-50 calculations. If they choose the 50-50 as Eastern Agency did, we ran those numbers based on the registered voter population as provided by the Navajo Nation Elections Office the week of May 23rd. With that registered voter data that they had at that time, and Eastern's voter population only was used to calculate the 50-50 formula for Eastern's allocation. So it did not have an impact on the allocations that were given to the other agencies. You are correct in your observation that any one agency choosing to utilize 50-50 over the number of veterans, those numbers do produce different results. There are two agencies that would get more money if the entire trust fund was calculated using 50-50. So those two methods are mutually exclusive. So that's why we ran the numbers first based on the veteran population to make agency allocations, and then allowed the agency to choose if they wanted to further subdivide based on veteran population or 50-50. And that way it has no impact on the other four agencies. Thank you for the question, sir.
Committee members, any follow-up?
Chair, when we, or when you deem it acceptable, could I ask a question that's unrelated to this matter? Thank you. It's related to veterans, but not next year's budget. Thank you.
Mr. Swerline.
I'm here, sir.
Honorable Vice Chair Slater, could you repeat the question?
Thank you. The question I wanted to ask was related to the carryover funds, and if Mr. Zerline could discuss the proposed legislation that he had, or methodology for allocating the trust fund monies. It's my understanding that for central agency and our veterans, we would only get 100,000 under what the current system is, and he had a proposal to make a more equitable distribution across the agencies and ensure that there's some equity and balance there and that it's justified. So I wanted a review of that and where the carryover stands, because I know that's been coming up recently, and there's, well, I'll just start there. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Vice Chair Slater. Mr. Swerline?
Thank you, sir. I apologize. I'm going through a coughing fit. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, for Delegate Slater's question regarding the carryover. So the memo that was issued by the Office of Management and Budget gave us two different totals. it gave us a combined total of $3,079,579.13 as the carryover balances from fiscal years 20 and 20 and 21. They gave us subdivided balances by agency that showed Chinle agency with a carryover balance from those two fiscal years of $100,055.63. Eastern agency with a carryover balance of $1,134,747.27. For Fort Defiance agency, $998,184.80. For Northern agency, $322,053.79. And for Western agency, $524,526.64. Now, it was and still is OMB's position that those agency carryovers needed to be carried over directly into their current year business units. What we had tried to do with the administration was redistribute those funds across all 5 agencies the same way that the FY22 budget had been calculated based on the veteran population. OMB said that that is incorrect. DOJ concurred that while the intent was appropriate, it was not supported by the budget instruction manual. The budget instruction manual did require and supported OMB's position that those carryover funds had to go direct to those business units. So with OMB indicating that Chinle agency, and I will just use Chinle as an example, their carryover only having been $100,000, of that $3 million, Chinle's fair share based on their veteran population should have been $518,035.71. The Veterans Trust Fund money belongs to the entire veteran population to be utilized for our various programs, specifically the financial assistance being the program that provides the most assistance for our veterans. With only having $100,000 carried over from the agency, Chinle was being shorted a significant amount of money. The veterans residing in Chinle were what equates to being penalized because they are living in Chinle. They use their funds almost 100%. Chinle as an agency, historically, when the 50-50 formula was used, was always being shorted its fair share of the allocations, which is why their carryover balance is so low. The veteran population in the agency, like I said, almost used up 100% of their funds from each year, resulting in very little carryover. On the flip side now, I'll talk about Eastern agency with their carryover balance having been $1,134,000. Their fair share of that should only have been $660,000. So we tried to redistribute the funds based on the same numbers that we had used for fiscal year 22. The carryover for Chinle, for Shiprock has all been exhausted. Fort Defiance, Eastern, and Western still have carryover balances. So we did put together a budget revision request that, in accordance with the BIM, requires oversight approval as the only and final authority. So that's what that proposed legislation was to take money from Eastern and Fort and give some to Chinle, to Shiprock, and to make everything fair, it was an additional $6,000 to Western. I think that's going to conclude my response to your question, sir. I hope that it answered what you were looking for. Thank you.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up if you'll indulge me?
Yes, Honorable Vice Chair, proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Zerline, you said that Chinley's carryover is exhausted. Does that mean that you've already distributed out the remaining 100,000, or can you go further into that? And then second, can you discuss what some of the reasons are for these massive carryovers at the agency level? Thank you.
Yes, sir. For your first question, it is correct that the 100,000 has been exhausted. The agency office still has additional pending financial assistance requests of additional veterans who are requesting for assistance. But in the Chinley account, there's no more money to be able to provide that assistance. As far as why some of these other agencies have such a large amount of carryover, remember the purpose of the program is to provide assistance to those who need it. It is not to give everybody a check at the beginning of the year and zero out the balance. Carryover in the case of the Veterans Trust Fund is usually a very good thing. If the money is in the right spot for veterans to use it when they need it. And with the Veterans Trust Fund being distributed in previous years across 110 different business units, or more recently, only in 5, there still remains a segregation problem that, using Chinley as an example, Chinley chapter proper, with the number of veterans that they have in that chapter, their historic allocation was always underfunded. The needs of the veterans of Chinley chapter far exceeded what their available allocation was. So when the Chinley chapter's allocation was used up, those veterans who were still in need were left in need until the beginning of the next fiscal year. I'm going to use Counselor chapter from Eastern as a counterpoint to that. Counselor chapter's allocation was extremely higher than the needs of their veteran population. Historically, they had between 3 and 5 veterans per year requesting for financial assistance, and they always had a remaining carryover. So Counselor chapter, as a single chapter, carried over from fiscal year 20 into 21, $100,000 by that single chapter's self. That's $100,000 that veterans from Chinley chapter needed desperately. But because the funding was siloed, they were not allowed to. So that's what we're trying to fix by streamlining the number of business units, making more funds available to the general veteran population at large and the surviving spouses and Gold Star mothers, to make sure that there's funds available when they actually need it. And as far as why Eastern has a carryover balance of over $1 million, it's because of where the money was when it was available. Individual CVOs, individual veterans, they weren't using that money. The same for Fort Defiance, having just under $1 million. So to say that the funds need to be distributed based on registered voter population, that highlighted the deficiencies in how we were allocating the money. To say distribute the funds based on the veteran population takes a big step in fixing the gap, but we are still going to have carryover balances in some agencies, and other agencies are going to exhaust their allocations completely. And that just comes down to a matter of policy. What does the program allow? And is the funding actually going to address the issues? I hope that answers your question, sir. If not, I'm here for a follow-up.
Chair, I have a follow-up if possible.
Honorable Slater, you have the floor.
Thank you. So I know you highlighted Chinley chapter because Chinley chapter has such a large veterans population and they have proximity to the office. Oftentimes they'll exhaust all of the funding and the outlying chapters will have issues. For example, my chapter is in accessing that. So this does seem like a way to increase the funding support to where the veterans actually are at the agency level. So I appreciate the consideration there. But second, this might be a question for OOC, but to the extent that you can answer it, please do so. When the carryover sits there out of the trust fund, does that mean that the money has actually been drawn down from the trust fund, or is it similar to other methodologies that OOC has worked on where they don't make drawdowns until really the expenditures are made from the line items? My concern is that if we have a lot of money that has been drawn down from the trust funds and it's not sitting in the trust fund accruing interest, then we're really harming the overall trust fund and the amount of money that can grow and be distributed to veterans. So that's, I guess, more of a mechanical question on when funding comes out of the trust fund, and is it sitting basically just in a pot instead of in the trust fund growing, but designated for withdrawal at a certain point in the future? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question, sir. I am able to answer part of it, but I will want OOC to weigh in on some of the technical aspects. The allocations each year of the Veterans Trust Fund is not, it's not a withdrawal from the trust fund principle. Through the code, calculations are made to determine what the fiscal year's allocation is going to be. And so that money is aside, it's not withdrawn, it's not, I'll just say it's not withdrawn from the principle of the trust, because it's calculated based on the interest, the income, dividends, and set-asides for the trust. So it sits there until it's exhausted. And I have been told by OOC, and along with a majority of the veteran population, I do not agree with their answer, but when it sits in these business units, it does not earn interest, nor does the carryover while it's pending being assigned into its business unit into the next fiscal year. I think if those dollars are sitting there, they should be physical dollars somewhere that should be permitted to accrue interest. And if not realized into the principle of the trust fund, it should be realized into the usable accounts within the fiscal year. But the actual mechanics, I know that that is what DOJ and OOC are going to talk about under item B on the agenda. So I am not going to touch on the actual mechanics and the formulas involved there. Thank you, sir.
Committee members, any follow-up?
Here, Jimmy, if I can respond.
Who is that?
Jimmy, investment section, OOC.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Carl Slater, to answer your question, yes, it does operate that way, that the funds are invested and they are brought down once expenditures occur. So we see $100 that's being expended, then we bring $100 back from the investment account. We don't take it out based off allocation or appropriations. We leave it there and we bring it down based off of expenditures, so that we can maximize the amount of time that it's invested, so it's earning income throughout the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate the response.
Okay. We do have a difference of interpretation on what actually occurs. Thank you. Committee members. Any follow-up questions? Again, there's a pattern. What I see is a pattern of the 50-50 formula. Benefits certain regions, whereas the veteran numbers also benefit certain regions. But what basically is within the controlling matter is how OMB and OOC institute what is mandated by law. Committee members, how do you wish to proceed? Line, we really didn't, all the specifics you stated in your report. There's still a lot of vagueness on what exactly you're talking about. See those allocations you calculated, side-by-side comparison. That would really help the committee.
I will send that right now, sir.
Chair, this is Vern Lee.
Committee members, if there's no questions, I'd like to open it up to the agency commanders. That's okay with you. Sure. All right, thank you, committee members. Oh, Mr. Vern Lee, you have the floor. Vern Lee, while he's trying to unmute Mr. Squirline, I guess a lot of the question was you wanted input from the agency veterans organizations. You set a deadline of June 20th. The question that we've been posed more than once is why June 20th deadline? Mr. Squirline.
Thank you for that question, sir. Executive branch division directors, we were given a revised and updated budget process calendar on May 17th. Or excuse me, this was dated May 17th. I received it on May 24th. On that, it stated that on June 20th was when the divisions, programs, and branches had to submit budgets for oversight, because the oversight committee hearings were going to start to be held between June 30th and July 11th. The 10-day difference there gave 5 days preparation for the committees to have the legislation drafted and 5 days for public comment before the start of hearings on June 30th. So that was our reason for requiring the agencies to tell us how they wanted to have their budgets calculated, so we knew which numbers to utilize in order to be able to send those exhibits over to the legislative staff for those budget legislations to be drafted.
Committee members, the Finance Committee, just yesterday adopted the it's legislation 102-22. The BIM, Budget and Instruction Manual. So one of the things that really kind of like intrigues me is the fact that you were asking veterans organizations to make a decision, yet we didn't have budget instruction manual adopted until yesterday. Mr. Vern Lee, are you back on the call?
This is Olin Kiyomi, commander for Fort Defiance Agency.
Oh, Mr. Kiyomi, you have the floor.
Yes. The Olin Kiyomi, Che Topahan Shlo, the Bashishin, Kiani, the Situation, the National, Retohachid, the Shah, Fort Defiance Agency commander. 26 chapters I represent in Arizona and New Mexico. We have the largest agency out of the 5 on the Navajo Nation. The data budget information. The Navajo Nation Veterans Advisory Council never informed of the budget process, nor operated at the agency level. It's the Navajo Nation Veterans Advisory Council under the Veterans Act. Under our plan of operation is to review the budgets so we can better educate and ask questions as you are doing now. If we haven't received any information regarding our budgets, our carryovers, always through the email. We have still yet to see the director at a Veterans Advisory Council meeting. These budgets are put together, as you know, council delegates, Shanatani, put together preliminarily in May. We should have at least gotten some estimated numbers to know where we're at this coming fiscal year. From there, we would have worked the numbers or help remedy with the director to say, this is how we're going to do it as far as the budget process. This is what we're going to work with. This is what we're going to recommend to the committee, the Budget and Finance, Health, Education, and Human Services. That never happened. So now, through an email, we were told there's a deadline on June 20th. We had to scramble around, round up all the veterans during still what is being COVID. So it's hard to find a chapter house that will host veterans during their meeting. Very cumbersome, including the gas prices. Some chapters don't have telecommunication capability or good communication in order to have some of these meetings. Neither does the agency have or possess certain equipment to hold such meetings. So it's a hindrance. And to tell us at the 11th hour to say, get a resolution together, and how Fort Defiance operates, I answer to the veterans. I'm the one as the commander, and my officers have to go by what my veterans say through resolution. I independently do not make that decision. It comes from the veterans themselves. In addition to that, there was no transparency on the budget to indicate the numbers to say, item A, this is how it would look potentially, the budget. If you were to do it 50-50 formula, this is an estimated number that you would get. If you were to do item B under the veterans count, this is how it would look. If you do the one pot system, this is how it would look. Individual business unit numbers, this is how it would look. A, B, C, D, and so forth. We never got that. I do believe that's what you guys are asking right now, Shanatani. You're asking, what do those numbers look like if each veterans organization were to ask, what would the budget look like? Have to remember our veterans are in that high peak of elderly age from 60 to 80 years old. Showing them on a PowerPoint presentation or on paper, showing them and explaining it to them to say, these are your options, these are what it looks like. Now choose one. We never got that. So seems like we're bypassing the Veterans Advisory Council. Again, this has happened to continue year after year after year. So we lost fiscal year 19 carryover. We lost it. That was another money for $300,000 or $400,000 that we lost. That went back into the trust fund. That money could have helped the veterans during the COVID season when we had major shutdowns on the nation. That money could have helped the veterans supplement their income and also offset their expenses. That never happened. Now it's 20 and 21 carryovers that we're dealing with. But still, veterans are having trouble applying for those benefits. Why? So if you were to compare veterans count and also the 50-50, you're going to see a large margin of money that's going to be, that the veteran's not going to get. We're basing it off chapter voters registration rather than the veterans count. So you're going to have 1,000 voters at Coyote Canyon, but you're only going to have 100 and some odd veterans at that community. So you're going to see a wide margin of money that's not there. So Mr. Zerline mentioned it's roughly about $500 to $600 that each veteran, if they were to request, that they will only receive. But you're only getting $300 hardship and $300 energy. As of right now, inflation in the process. It's here. Gas is up, propane's up, groceries up, everything's up. How do we better serve our veterans? Every veteran out there, I would assume, right now is having some trouble. How do we maximize the dollars to help assist the veterans? If we're going to pick between the 50-50 formula or veterans count, and a sponsor legislation on behalf of NNVA or the Veterans Advisory Council or the veterans to say, this is from now on how we're going to allocate the money. This veterans count is how we're going to distribute the funds rather than 50-50. Somebody needs to drop legislation in order to clarify this. That way, the director can have a set rule to say, the law says that I have to distribute these money under the veterans count, which could encourage other veterans or incoming veterans to register at their local agencies. This is how we get the veterans count. As of right now, we still have an X amount of veterans that are not on the reservation or on that still have yet to register. We're getting a whole wave of them right now. So as of right now, I want to request, or I'd like to recommend to the committee that this line go back to the advisory council or the agencies, better educate them on the budget process to say, these are the pros and these are the cons and these are the amounts. This way is transparency, education, and information that's clarified to the veteran to say, These are your monies, and these are your monies at work. Now, we still have to account for the overall budget for the Veterans Administration, those costs. Those are questions that we want to ask too also. But this is not just with the budget. It's also dealing with veterans housing also. We have still yet to see budgets and numbers about how much was allocated, how much was the balance before money was being spent, how many houses are being built, what's the average cost of homes, labor, who's the contractor. We have a contract with these contractors or volunteers or whoever. We have still yet to see all of those information regarding veterans money, veterans trust fund dollars. I like to emphasize these are veterans money. We should not, those are the questions and those are the actions that we need to take. The Veterans Advisory Council, as of right now, has not seen anything. Zero. So I would like to request a workshop with the Health, Education, and Human Services and maybe members of the Budget and Finance, along with Navajo Nation Veterans Administration and the Veterans Advisory Council, to actually sit together. And there you will see the missing pieces, the missing puzzles to say, instead of pointing that him or her did it, or she did it, he did it, this will all come together to say,
Thank you, Mr.
problem,
Naomi.
this is how we should.
Thank you.
So I would appreciate that, Shanant. Ani, yeah.
Thank you.
Chair, I'm back. Vern Lee.
There's none. Oh.
Ja, President, the vice and members, Naflinigi, ja, President, good morning. Back to Delegate Slater's questions regarding the carryover. Let go stand for the space of non-taco veteran trust fund. And let's say we went to continuing resolutions every quarter based on because the budget wasn't prepared from the get-go. Although we went to this one pot system, of course, there was so much problems with the budget. Of course, September they stopped taking applications for assistance. But prior to that, they apply for assistance. Although sometimes those assistance are denied, or the application is just sitting there because of lack of employees, and the turnarounds are not there. We have other people, VSOs, that come to the agencies in Shiprock. Of course, these applications are not processed. So when September comes around and they stop for closeouts and stuff like that, of course, that money is unspent. Then that goes back into carryover, not left. And then when carryover comes on, we have the same mechanical problems. The Hajor State Aiden had Obasana Plonsa. Of course, coming down from 30,000 to 10,000 feet level, the mechanics of the process, how it works down at this level, it's probably too low of a look at. So even not, you carry over not late. Although the other thing that I wanted to ask was the Veteran Trust Fund for FY 23 today, the interest in the quiz the main how much money came out that's divided between the 5 agencies. And my question is, was Veteran Trust Fund used? No, Veterans Count used or 50-50 used? So if either one of them is used to divvy up the Veteran Trust Fund FY 23, and then we come down to the agency level, and we have a different process that we're requesting. Some of them are requesting Veterans Count. Ado 50-50, no. Ado business unit, those honestly. It's not friendly, not computer friendly. This policy. And I do think that there needs to be a legislation whether we use 50-50 or Veteran Trust Count, Veterans Count, and or Veteran Trust Fund budget. I don't know. Thank you.
Yeah, Burnley, I guess the main thing the committee is really looking at right now, the carryover fund from prior years. We're getting clarification that even though they're got business units, they still earn interest, and the only lowering of those carryovers is with requests from the chapter veterans organization, the way I understand it. Of course, prior to from the establishment, 2018 to 2021, those are the chapter veterans allocations. They're existing in business unit, a dollar amount. The quacky, the FY 2022, the oil team, so cease the bait for the needle. We just voted on it, and there is that mixture. And that's the part that we want to get clarification on. And I'd like to, that particular item, carryovers and how it exists now. If a job $1,000, Adam and I were colleagues. T. Allen DeGay, he's got 3 legislation. 0021-22. 0022-22. Auto 0024-22. That's on today's agenda at Navi for the and that's what would establish how we proceed. Once adopted, once it's signed into law, that would govern and thinking FY 2023 budget. But so Craigie, the questions that Mr. Werline has posed to the Agency Veterans Organization. That will be decided by NABI this afternoon, and then in the special session, we hope to decide the outcome of those three legislations, and that would be what would guide budget formulation going forward for FY23. Here with Albuquerque, and then with that, let me, rather than be adding my thoughts, let me go ahead and turn the floor to Part B of this report. Part B is be provided by Mr. Cordell Shorty, the Office of Management and Budget, and Mr. Dominic Vial, Executive Director for OMB, and Ms. Elizabeth Begay, Controller. With that, Mr. Cordell Shorty. Mr. Dominic Vial.
Mr. Chair, this is Dominic Bial.
Oh, yeah, hey, Mr. Vial.
Good morning. Still morning.
So, good morning to you too.
Okay, Mr. Chair, committee members, are you on item B now?
Yes, we just got to it.
Okay, at this point, there's two, looks like arrowheads on veterans numbers and the 50-50 formula for chapters and CVOs, and then the legal analysis. On the first arrowhead, the veterans numbers and the 50-50, that really is a Veterans Administration Office matter, and Mr. Zweerlein has already explained that, how he has done it, following the respective plans of operation and so forth that apply. And at this point, OMB anyway, we don't have much to add on that because the administration over at Veterans Administration is the one who handles it. That's what they're there for, and that's what they do. The legal analysis, well, I would have to defer to DOJ. In the past, it's been mentioned to me more than once that I'm not a member of the Navajo Nation Bar, therefore I'm not qualified to give legal advice. So, therefore, I would defer to DOJ on that particular question. At this point, Mr. Chair, that's about all I can say about the subject matter. We just got notice of this meeting yesterday, so we weren't able to prepare anything more thorough than just what I'm telling you now. Mr. Chair, thank you.
The main aspect is, have the budget modifications been submitted to accomplish the usage of the carryovers?
Mr. Chair, my recollection is this, and Mr. Zwerline can correct me if I don't say this right. The carryovers that were referred to earlier now require a reallocation. And per the Appropriations Act, a reallocation is moving funds from one business unit to other business units. So that requires legislation to be enacted by the Oversight Committee. My last communication with Mr. Zwerline, roughly a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, is he was working to prepare the paperwork necessary to accomplish that. But my understanding is that has not been done yet. So again, if I misstated anything, Mr. Zwerline can correct me, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, this is Director Zwerline. I would like to offer a correction, sir.
Mr. Zwerline?
Mr. Bial is correct in that we did have his office review the budget revision forms, and we did send those through DOJ once that was concluded with draft of the legislation. Approximately 6 weeks ago, that draft legislation was given to a member of this committee who had offered to sponsor that legislation. Another member of this committee had followed up a few weeks later, asking how their agency could get more funding, and that delegate was provided a brief. That delegate followed up with Office of Legislative Services and saw that there was no dropped legislation for processing on the legislative side. So that delegate was given a copy of that draft legislation. The last update I had from that delegate, and they are more than welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, but the response they got from Legislative Services was that there was 120 pieces of legislation ahead of this budget revision legislation. So it is submitted for legislative action. And when those folks are able to get to it, then this committee would be able to take action on that. My fear is that that's not going to happen before the end of this fiscal year. That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Committee members, any questions for Mr. Bial? Honorable Pernell Halona.
Thank you, Chair, and Mr. Bial, I was wondering about those legislations that you were talking about. Are those the same legislations, the ones that Keyal and Brigade is working on for the change in the funding? No?
This is the reallocate, what they're referencing is the reallocation of the carryover fund.
So his
Mr. Chatabeda.
Yo, ya kasita.
Oh, Che. Review, 0021, 0022, and 0023 with the committee. please. Appreciate it.
Okay, 0021-22. It's going to, it's amending the Veterans Act that was passed in,
24, 21, 22, and 24. No, 23. 21, 22, 24.
there? Can you hear me?
Okay, I'm getting coached by Mr. Leonard Bose. The actual ones are 0021, 0023, 0024.
22, 22.
21,
21, 22, 24.
0021,
22.
0022, 0024. Okay, now I've even. Okay, Honorable Paul Begay coaches me on the side too, so we got that correct. Mr. Abeda, just to, for all the folks on the call. 0021. And the sponsor of that legislation had provided public hearings on his own accord with the agency veterans organization. Miss Elizabeth DeGay, are you on the call?
Mr. Chair, this is Robert Willie from the Controller's Office. Ms. Begay is currently on another meeting right now.
Mr. Robert Willie.
Good morning, sir, and members of the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee. This is Robert Willie, Office of the Controller, Accounting Manager, for the record.
Who?
And I also have Mr. Jeremy Jimmy from the investment section, who's been working on part of the calculations. But as far as the 50-50 formula, I don't have any updates on that particular issue at this time. Thank you.
Okay, then, I guess the main thing is the carryovers. There was February 25 or February 22nd memo that basically asked Shoreline to submit revised budgets for those carryovers. And in April 7th, we met and we had been informed that it was only one agency that had, there was only budget submitted for one agency. And there was time span. And I'm wondering if all those budget revisions have been submitted. Mr. Willie?
Mr. Chair, as far as budget revisions, that would probably be under Mr. Bial's purview. He receives the budget at OMB, so I'm not sure if they've received all of those. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Mr. Bial, back to you.
Hello?
Oh.
Okay. As I understand the issue or the question is, has the carryover budgets for the reallocation been submitted to OMB? I think as Mr. Zwerlein mentioned, they were prepared and we reviewed them for proprietary purposes, meaning to ensure everything was correct. The arithmetic, mathematics, calculations, and object codes, and so forth. And we work with his staff to effect any corrections that may be necessary. But that was done. And as Mr. Zwerlein explained, it is now over at legislative, awaiting the drafting of the legislation for the Oversight Committee. And as he said, it might take some time, but that's where it's at, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Committee members, have any comment, questions? No. Okay. There's no further questions. Let's proceed to hearing from Navajo Nation Department of Justice.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chris Schneider from the Department of Justice, the Human Services and Government Unit.
Okay. Mr. Snyder.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
2018 to 2021. The revenues from Veterans Trust Fund were allocated using Chapter 50/50 formula. And there was no changes in the law, but in 2022, the Squareline went to a part of using veterans population. How does that either conflict or coincide with the Appropriations Act, where money's going to chapters would be using a 50/50 formula? And the reason I'm saying chapters is that's the way the allocations were based in the prior years. Now, Question is the use of veterans numbers, veterans population, action under the Appropriations Act?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I understand your question correctly, the 50-50 split is actually for allocations to chapters, and this would not be an allocation to a chapter. It's actually going to the veterans organizations, and they're not part of the chapter. So that doesn't apply to veterans. The veterans should be appropriated pursuant to the veterans count, how many registered veterans there are in that chapter. That's the more appropriate way to calculate any appropriations going on.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Could you put that in an email? So that we
Yes,
can
Mr. Chair, I can do that. I believe the site that we're looking at is section 1176C, second paragraph, that says all trust fund income distribution shall be determined pursuant to all eligible Navajo veterans and distributed among those applicable Navajo chapters to be expended in accordance with section 1172 of this plan. But I can do that.
Committee members, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, there's also a further issue that we need to discuss with you, but we'd like to ask for executive session on.
Okay. Who would be, on your end, who would be in the executive session?
Director Zwerlin, Adjua from the Tax and Finance Unit, Jeremy Jim from the Office of Controller. Is there anyone I'm forgetting?
Chair, so this is Edra from the Tax and Finance Unit, if I may.
Who is that?
Adjua from DOJ's Tax and Finance Unit.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Chair, if I may request, so Kristen Lowell from our Tax and Finance Unit should also be included in the executive session, and Mr. Rob Woolley. Thank you.
Anybody from OMB?
I leave that to your discretion, Chair.
Thank you. Miss Angelica Benali, are we, prepared to send out a executive session, number?
Mr. Chair and members of the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee, I can set up an executive session number. However, there are some individuals that I do not have an email to, such as the individuals at the Tax and Revenue, Ashwa, and I think Mr. Lowell is who, and Jeremy Jim. I do not have their email addresses, but if Chris could forward the Zoom information to them, and then so that they can log in.
I believe they're on now.
Well, I'm going to be setting up a different Zoom,
Oh, okay.
a separate Zoom.
And yes,
This is Dana. Please make sure to include Office of Legislative Counsel. That would be myself and Chad Beta. And also, I would strongly recommend that somebody from ONB be included in the executive session.
thank you. Thank you, Ms. Barbara. Thank you. Mr. Dominic Beal, Mr. Robert Willie, Mr. Jeremy Jim, Mr. Swerline, Mr. Snyder, and I didn't, and Kristen Lowe, and I didn't catch the young lady that addressed us from the taxation and revenue.
Chair, my name is Ajwa Ajay Danso.
Okay, yes. Ashwa. So, and then, of course, Ms. Bob Roth and Mr. Beta and the committee members and staff, Mr. Mose and Ms. Benali. Let's go on committee members based on that request. I hear a motion for an executive session. Motion by Honorable Monica, second by Honorable Paul Begay. And it would be addressing legal matters within that executive session. Mr. Mose, roll call vote for the executive session. Hello. Yes, sir. What time we got? 11:50. 11:50. 1 hour. 1 hour? We'll go 1 hour on the executive session. Ashiko. Okay. Executive session for 1 hour.
Thank you.
Honorable Paul Begay Jr. Paul Begay Jr. votes green. Honorable Pernell Halona. Honorable Pernell Halona votes green. Honorable Carl Russell Slater.
Green.
Honorable Carl Russell Slater votes green. Honorable Charlene Soule.
I vote green.
Charlene Soule votes green. Honorable Escondido votes green. Chair vote of 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Into executive session at 11:51. I was waiting for number from Angie.
Okay. Before we go into executive session, we'll do a 10-minute recess so that Ms. Benali can set up that other Zoom call number and contact all the other folks. then we'll reconvene in 7 minutes. High noon. Okay.